Yo, let's all get a couple in. Just to piss off the sound guy. All right, welcome to Fireside Tats, episode 35 or 36. We're a little confused on that right now. The premier tattoo education podcast for people who have not yet found a better tattoo education podcast. So today, we're changing our format up a little bit. We're in Austin, Texas. We're not in the Fireside Studios, obviously. I don't have a co-host. I have two co-hosts. Even better. So look, if you guys don't know who these guys are, then I don't know why. These are a couple of tattoo heavyweights, have been for a long time. Nick Baxter, Jeff Ensminger, from right here in Austin, Texas. And like I said, we're going to switch it up a little bit today, and we're not going to go over any questions at all. We're going to tackle a different subject. Really, it's a subject that we hit quite a few episodes back, just a little. We're going to talk about the value to tattooers of working in different mediums. One thing that we get constantly bombarded with is questions like technical questions about machines, about pulling lines, about solid color, about all those kinds of things, but we rarely get questions relating to the art side of tattooing. So, and it's super important. And these guys are both really kind of art-based tattooers. You guys were both kind of like, this is a question for both of y'all. Were you artists? Were you like painters first, or tattooers, and your painting involved with your tattooing, or what?
I was going to art school before I got a tattoo apprenticeship, so I was kind of learning color theory. I was learning life drawing, still life painting, and sort of classical oil painting techniques, and then I got into tattooing from there. So
you had an art background. You were in art school before you ever touched a tattoo machine.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of go the other way around. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I drew a lot. I did art school too. Not like you went to art school after high school.
Yeah.
Like like college. I did art school like a private thing, like when I was in grade school, and then I had like an art background. It was just different.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that stuff really translated to anything I would do now necessarily, but I definitely had some kind of art background,
Yeah. Well, the one, like I was just mentioning a second ago, we get so many questions, technical questions, but we get really so few questions about the art side of it. And I think it's unfortunate because a lot of times, especially since this podcast is geared towards like newer tattooers, up and coming tattooers, a lot of them are looking at other tattooers and they're drawing from tattoos. And I think a lot of times it doesn't help when their like clientele comes in and they want whatever, like a peacock, and they bring you 3 pictures of tattooed peacocks. So you're like looking at reference material that's tattoos, and you're drawing in a sketchbook with an instrument that makes a mark just like a tattoo machine, and you're never really pushing yourself outside of those like boundaries. So that's kind of what I wanted to hit on. Kind of the importance of we're going to talk, I guess, some about painting, but I mean, not limited to painting, like charcoal, anything that forces you to make a different mark than you can make with a tattoo machine, right? Kind of. So we'll start with Nick. You actually have written a book on like a technical oil painting book, an instructional book. So do you find that your process, as far as like preparing for a tattoo and preparing a reference for a painting, do you have a similar approach in working with both of them? What do you find that kind of one lends to the other? Or?
It's a very similar approach as far as brainstorming and collecting reference material to work from. It's a similar approach to planning out my color. As far as doing layering in both mediums, like when I oil paint, I layer, like I'll do the whole piece in one layer, then I'll let that dry, and I'll layer over it again with more colors, and I'll use the optical combination of the 2 layers to make one single illusion. And so I started planning that way with my tattoos as well, kind of just brainstorming in my head. Like, I don't need to plan anything on paper anymore, but I'll kind of use that same mind frame when I plan for my larger tattoo projects that I know have multiple sessions. I'll try to game plan it to where I saturate the entire piece with one layer of color, and then I know I'm going to come back after it's healed and I'm going to saturate it again with different colors or more detail or whatnot, different needle groupings. And so the optical combination of those two layers in the skin creates a third element of
It seems like I've even heard you use terms like glazing when referring to tattoos, and so. But I mean, obviously there are limitations to skin that there aren't to to oil paint on canvas or on board or whatever, and especially with the use of mediums and all that kind of stuff. So do you? I mean, is it? Can you apply those things, and are they effective to like kind of to work in layers? Do you feel like you get a similar effect that you get in?
It's similar, but clearly there are some limitations there as far as what the human body can handle, what skin can handle. I've found that any more than 3 layers of tattooing is redundant. You really can only saturate one area 3 times over, and then you're barely making any difference after that. So, you could start out with something red and layer over it with some light blue, and after that second layer heals, it'll kind of be like a medium purple, but more towards red than the light blue. And then you could layer over it a third time with more blue and maybe get it a tiny bit more of a balanced purple combination between the red layer and the 2 subsequent blue layers. And then after that, it's just barely any difference, and the aging of it over the years is really going to cancel out the finest subtleties of it. So you kind of have to plan for that and make sure you're not just noodling around and wasting time for something that's only going to look that way for like a year or 2.
Yeah. So you've pushed it beyond that and just seen that it wasn't worth the trouble that you're putting
into.
Yeah,
exactly. Like now that I'm sort of like 15, 16 years into my career, I'm starting to get pieces back from when I first started developing that technique, and I see exactly where I wasted my effort because it doesn't matter anymore. And so I'm still in a process of learning and dialing it in and getting more efficient with it. I think I think I've laid out the basic concept of it as much as can be, and now it's just a matter of dialing in the efficiency and not wasting any time or any of the client's time and money.
Yeah,
that's the hard part. Is like finding the balance between stripping it down to the simplest things that it needs to be and the fanciness,
Yeah.
Finding that area,
Yeah. You've talked a little bit when we were talking a month or 2 ago about you guys are putting together a joint art show, and you were making some paintings, and I was asking you what kind of stuff you were working on, and you made the comment that your paintings are almost like anti-tattoo these days, like you're trying to do things that are the complete opposite of the way that you tattoo. So do you? So I assume with that, with that mindset, are you still finding that you bring value from one medium to the other? I mean, are you really trying to separate the two intentionally?
I guess both, honestly. I mean, it just depends on what I'm doing. I don't know. I go through different phases, and I guess right now the phase is when I'm painting, I want to do something totally different than tattooing. Because I know I get to tattoo, I've got that booked and I know what I'm doing, and that's a collaborative effort between me and a client. There's, like what we were saying, limitations of the skin, and with the painting, I don't have to worry about any of that. I can just kind of do whatever I want, and I don't know. I don't always want to paint the stuff that I'm tattooing,
Yeah.
And also a big part of that, it's not that it's like anti-tattooing, it's just that there's a lot of tattooers out there that paint very similar stuff to each other, and it could be really awesome, but I just don't want to repeat the same thing everyone else is doing. I want to try to do something a little bit different, try to bring something else to the table, but
it just gets redundant.
And I think that's becoming more and more apparent with more and more tattooers, out there, and more people getting into the scene. I hate to say that word scene, but it's becoming harder and harder and more important to do something that's and not just tattooing,
Yeah. I think you noticed that especially with with some conventions having like art shows kind of built in and things now, and encouraging tattooers to bring to work in other mediums and to paint. And you go and you look through, and now there are always some really nice pieces, but a lot of times it's just like, wow, it looks like a lot of tattoos on canvas. I mean, it looks like a lot of black outlines and a lot of flat color. It looks like flash paintings, and so that and I think that unfortunately that's just a lot of the mindset of a lot of tattooers. If they're not drawing to tattoo or drawing for tattoos, then they're just not being productive or something like that.
And it makes sense depending on like where you're at in tattooing and where you want to go. Because a lot of people, that's like their practice for designing a tattoo, is like doing that painting. And if it's traditional tattooing, it makes sense to paint traditional paintings, you know, do the same thing you want to tattoo. But, you know, maybe you get to a point where you don't need, you've got enough tattooing to practice all you want. You don't necessarily just have to, it's not like you don't have people coming through the door getting tattoos where you feel like you need to paint it to get it out. Like,
there's sorry.
Oh, no.
There's like a marketing angle, I think, is like a lot of tattooers at a certain stage of your career, you're painting to market your tattoos. You're saying, get this tattooed because that's how I'm going to make my money, because you might sell painting, you might not, but tattoos are pretty steady income for a lot of us. So there's like a marketing aspect. So you might want to replicate your tattoo style for marketing, and then once you've like saturated and you can't, and you don't have the time or energy to take more tattoo clientele, well then your mind wants to explore and wander, and you know you sort of have an incentive to then not paint the same imagery.
And it's also not just like a traditional versus like realism tattooer, because that's what it kind of started to sound like when I was talking about it. Because I've seen plenty of like well accomplished traditional tattooers that they aren't interested in painting traditional paintings anymore. They want to pursue other avenues with their painting, and they get into more realism painting, and you know, so it's not just traditional.
You know. One of the things I found when I kind of pushed myself to make paintings and make art that was not for an upcoming tattoo and I think it's easy to fall into that, especially when you're tattooing full time and you go home and you draw for the tattoos the next day, and then it's like, when do I ever have time to do anything for myself? But if you can develop a little discipline and find some time to do that, there are so many subtleties that come with working in another medium, whether it's anti-tattoo or whether it's the same thing that you're tattooing. Just using things like a limited palette and really seeing how colors, how pigments blend, and how they, even if you're approaching it the same way as the tattoo and you're not glazing or using like traditional oil painting techniques, just playing with edge, like lost edges, and playing with like atmospheric stuff and whatever, and you can find ways you can find ways to get those same effects even if you're like a traditional style tattooer. You can find tricks by using other mediums, even if you're really not looking to like to be a fine art painter or whatever. There are
I think the color thing that you're talking about is probably, if anything, like the easiest thing to take, like, to get like some benefit from working in another medium. Just seeing, what mixing one color with another color, what's that look like? Not everyone takes the time or knows how to do that in a tattoo, or maybe they just keep themselves from doing it. Like, it's more than just mixing blue and red together to get purple, but mixing colors that don't really make sense to mix together. That you would never know unless you just started mixing color on a palette. It's easier to do it in a painting than it is to just all of a sudden start doing it in a tattoo.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's pressure on a tattoo. There's not necessarily any pressure on a painting. So you're free to experiment in ways you wouldn't want to in the spur of the moment during a tattoo. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that there are not the limitations of the client sitting there and experimenting on skin from something that's not as easy to change. You really only get so many shots to pack color into skin, then you really can't change it anymore. I think that Jeff, you
I might be wrong because I don't see every tattoo that you do, but it seems like your approach overall has become more kind of traditional as time has gone on. Like we've talked about, you're working on a piece on me right now, and you made a comment like I rarely use anything smaller than like a 13 mag or 15. I can do a tattoo this big with a 13, which is a really like traditional mindset, you know.
We'll start yelling.
Yeah. But so I mean, has that traditional approach just developed strictly through tattooing, or do you?
Yeah, definitely. I guess you know, I wanted to. I don't know. I mean, I experimented a lot and did a lot of different styles, more realistic styles of tattooing. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. You know, generally everything comes out, you know, nice and it makes a really good tattoo. Yeah. But it doesn't always mean for me that it's going to be a tattoo that's going to look great, you know, in 10 or 15 years. And that's really nothing. Like I want to try to think like, what's a tattoo going to look like the whole life of that person, you know? Yeah. And I mean, I still want I want to get across the same message I was trying to do before visually, but I want to do it in a semi-responsible manner. And I want it to be bold, you know. Mm-hmm. For me, it kind of got to the point where tattoos that I didn't look like tattoos anymore. And I was like, it wasn't as fun because I wanted things to look like tattoos.
How do you mean didn't look like?
Bold, like,
okay.
You know, the stuff that I liked about tattooing before I tattooed.
Yeah.
You know, like it felt like it got so fancy that I got away from all the things that made me fall in love with tattooing. So it was like trying to figure out a way to integrate both of those things, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting because your approach is almost the exact opposite. I mean, everything you do is very painterly, very tons of texture, tons of atmosphere, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a little deceptive though, in that that's the finished product, but my actual working technique is not too fancy. I lay out a minimum of colors for every tattoo, like usually
I think you do it pretty simple,
like 12 or less colors. Like some artists like set up for their tattoos, like half their desk, you know, like half their thing is just rows of ink caps, right?
Like every color, like every 6 or 7 reds.
Exactly. And like I have never done that my whole career, and yet I've achieved sort of like a fancier, more painterly look. But I never lay out more than 10, 12 colors per tattoo. I never lay out more than 3, maybe rarely 4 machines, 4 needle groupings. It's just like a loose shading round and a magnum. So there's some deception there as far as like the final look I'm achieving. Yeah, like I wanted it to usually be a little more fancy or a little more painterly, but my techniques and my approach, I really love the traditional approach and the traditional techniques. I try to strip it down, make it as foolproof as possible, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of like a testament to your method of tattooing, because I feel like the ultimate goal in tattooing, or one of the ultimate goals, is to produce something that looks like it was way harder than it was to actually do. To do as little as possible and make it look like you did everything. And so, I mean, you obviously do that, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That I think I was telling you a little while ago. I recently did a painting workshop with Casey Ball, a really good figure painter, and he's really the same way as far as his as far as his approach. His palette's really simple. He basically has blues, yellows, and reds, and he has like a dark, medium, and light of each of those things, and then white and black, and that's basically it. And he talks a lot about just like the biggest thing is hit your values, get your values right first, or nothing's right. The color really isn't that important if the value isn't right. And then he doesn't. I would talk about something being too warm or too cool, and he's like, I don't even like the way that sounds. He's like, does it need more yellow, red, or blue? Like if you've got the value right, now we're trying to find the color. Like, is it redder than that? Is it bluer than that? Is it, what is it? So like he in painting, he kind of dumbs it down, for lack of a better term, the same way that you're kind of talking about with using a minimal palette, minimal needle groupings, and just trying to get more with less. And even to the point where when we were getting to the point where I was kind of finishing a painting, he was like, okay, where can you even like simplify strokes? Where you have 3 strokes, where can you pull those and make it give the illusion that was a single brush stroke that pulled all of that off. So like he's like, it's really subtle. It doesn't really mean much, but when someone gets up on the paint, they're like, oh shit, it's like a single stroke of paint. It's like, well, not really. It's really about 20, but it just turned into a single stroke of paint, just trying to make something look more simple than it actually was. But yeah, back to the points you made about about people setting out so many inks. I think that's something that you see with social media and stuff now, and seeing people setups on such a regular basis, and you see someone that's pulling off these like beautiful color portraits or something, and you look and they have like 20 peaches, all these different flesh tones. I'm like,
that's crazy.
What the hell do I do with it? I would have no idea what to do with those things.
I wouldn't either. Yeah. But people would.
I don't know if all those people know what they're doing.
I guess not. Yeah, but
it could be easy to get like a rainbow effect in a tattoo when you have a rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
But if you keep a family of colors that you can mix, and it becomes like a palette, like a painting.
Yeah, yeah.
And an oil painter generally doesn't use all those colors. He uses like 6, or something like that.
So there's foundational art skills for a reason. They're your foundation. You never abandon your foundational art skills, like you were saying what Casey does. Value, value is the foundation for everything we see, and the way our eyes distinguish light from dark.
Right.
So you never abandon your foundations, and so I guess that's what we're talking about, like with the ink caps and stuff, and like your color palette and minimal working techniques is just like they're foundations for a reason. So a lot of people in their quest to make the best or the most fanciest or the most evolved or the newest, coolest, like tend to forget, just stick to your roots.
Yeah.
And that'll show you the way every time.
Before we get away from it, I just want to say one thing about the reds. There's almost no point in having any more than like one red.
It's true.
I mean, you could maybe have one red and maybe like a tangerine type red or something.
A cool red, a warm red. Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. There's almost no point
for tattoos.
Yeah,
not for painting.
Yeah, I'm just talking about tattoo. I just feel like it's got to be said, because I think too many people, especially with that color red, too many people have too many options for ink, and they try to use all those options. And I mean, just a right smack dab in the middle, medium red, that's about all you need. And any
in
of those
10 years, that's all you'll see.
Yeah. I mean, you can darken that, you
photo.
can lighten it, you can do whatever you want to do with that.
Yeah.
And they usually stick and heal and look better. And if you don't use like some crimson red or super thin transparent red out of the bottle that doesn't go in worth a crap, and it doesn't look solid.
Yeah. Do you think red's the only color that holds true for?
No. I just think red's
Just
probably
red's
the one that if you're gonna do it, if anyone's gonna do it with any color, do it with red, please.
Yeah.
That's the one. Because it's so hard to get crimson and like deep reds to be solid and to heal solid. And I think a lot of that is because people rely on some of those darker reds right out of the bottle, and those just never work out. I don't think, and I've tried a lot of stuff. I don't know. I mean, I know you do something similar. I mean, darken it with some like a deep green or black or something like that, and you're gonna end up with.
It's gonna look the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like in the future?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that's an interesting point, though, of something, because we've been sort of talking about how a second medium does translate to tattooing. That's an example of how a second medium does not translate to tattooing. Yeah. So it's not like you can give this like blanket answer for any which way. It's like you need to experiment with a second medium, see what you can extract.
Right, yeah, everything.
But don't assume everything translates, because it doesn't necessarily. And I guess to what Jeff was just talking about, like whether you darken a red with black or whether you darken it with a dark green, that distinction will be noticeable for year 1, year 2, and then depending on aging, by year 10 it's just dark red.
Yeah.
Like it's worn into the skin. You've shed a lot of the pigment by shedding skin cells, and it's been beaten up by the weather or whatever you do in your life, and it's just dark red at that point.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all. I totally agree with what Nick's saying. It's pretty much goes for all colors. Like you're eventually only going to maybe see 3 shades, dark, medium, light at the most, you know? So having like anything more than that in a tattoo is, I mean, I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but
It's for your picture.
Yeah.
So
it's
just
for the
be
first little
honest
while.
about it. Like,
yeah.
don't bullshit yourself or anyone else. It's for your picture, and that's fine. If you're trying to if you're a young artist trying to build your portfolio, and you just level with your clients, and be like, look, I'm going to get a little fancy with this because, you know, this reason or this reason. But in the end, it's just going to, you know, it's just for me and my picture, and they end up, you know, and they consent to that. They're cool with it, and there's good communication going on between artist client. Then fine, but just know. Like be honest with yourself. Like in 10 years, it's not going to matter.
It's not going to, and it's
Don't
going to
noodle the hell out of it because you'd just be wasting time.
and it's good, and it comes back around to value. That's where, like you're saying, you're going to see light, medium, and dark. So the colors really are secondary, anyways, and even probably more important in tattooing than in painting or anything else, because you're looking through skin at the image, anyways. At the end of the day, so so you really have to push that. You have to nail those values, and you have to push that contrast even harder than you would in other mediums for that longevity to be there. I think. So yeah, well, I mean, talking about value, we were talking about painting, but so you hit on it a little bit in that talking about light, and so you guys both do some photography as well, right? Don't you? Do
Yeah,
some?
I've dabbled sort of as an enthusiast.
Yeah. So you're as far as building, I know you said you don't do a lot as far as the building up a lot of reference and stuff for tattoos now, but we're talking to younger artists here, and with me making the point that a lot of times people are drawing from tattoos or drawing from drawings instead of drawing from imagery, drawing from life. Basically, everyone who went to art school heard light reveals form, and so when you're taking your when you're drawing from someone else's stylized opinion of what this thing looks like, you're forming your opinion not on what light really does, but what their idea of what light really did.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about maybe what photography has brought to the table for both of you guys, for painting and for tattoos, if anything.
Oh, for painting, I mean, it's one of the foundations because I try to specialize in photorealist painting. So, of course, I'm studying the way camera lenses, you know, bend light and reveal form to the eye, and little tricks like how they blur out images and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like intertwined with my painting to such a intimate level. It's like can't be separated, you know.
Yeah.
Unless I totally break style and pursue a different genre of painting.
Yeah.
And so as from there, so my tattoos are like step 3. You know what I'm saying? It's like photography to painting, then to tattoos, because I have to then adapt what can be painted into what can be tattooed. Mm-hmm. So it's like a game of telephone. It just gets like translated through each medium, and so it's not necessarily direct photography to tattoo. It's like photography to paint to tattoo.
Yeah, but photography to kind of helps you learn to see, if nothing else, and like how when you are inventing things in tattoos, you can draw from what you've seen and what
exactly.
you.
It's just building up a muscle memory. Like I know approximately like what a blurry background object looks like because I've studied so many photographs that I've taken. Mm-hmm. You just sort of like build up an intuition level.
Yeah. What about from your approach? I mean, from a more from the tattoo standpoint, a more kind of stylized, traditional approach. Do you see photography or being of any value to what you do?
Yeah, I mean, not as much anymore, but I mean, it's still there. I mean, sometimes I do realistic tattoos where I need some kind of photo reference, whether I take it myself or get it from someone or off the internet. I mean, someone had to take the photo, but you know, I don't use it as much now. If I'm gonna take a photograph now, it's more just for the sheer sake of taking a photo, I guess. You know, like not really Not like Nick, where he's actually using that for
Reference.
a painting.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I will, but
would you say you do it less now because you've like built up this like storage file in the back of your brain to where you just like kind of know what stuff looks like?
yeah. I
So-
mean, that definitely affects it. I'm sure
It is still important just as something to understand.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's whether you're using it for reference for a painting or not. It's important to at least figure out and understand the way that our eye captures light, and that's what the camera does, is mimics like the way we see it,
Yeah.
a split second of what we see, you know. And I mean, to a certain extent, I guess it's because, you know, I got to a point where I got comfortable enough that I didn't necessarily have to take it every time, like a photo, or stay on top of that. It is kind of like a bank of information that's always in the back of your head, like you're saying about a blurred out background or some kind of, you know.
Yeah, you're drawing from what you've seen before, and you've looked at it and drawn from it enough to be able to use it without literally seeing it each time. I could see that, and I think even if you're, even if you're the most traditional tattooer in the world, I still think there's a lot of value to like, you're tattooing a bird's wing, and it's not going to look anything like a photo of a bird you might take, but at least you know how light hits those feathers for real. And you can stylize the shit out of that if you want, make it whatever, but at least it like looks like it could exist in real space, even though it's not a real image.
I mean, I would argue that even the most stylized traditional tattooing is still based on photography. It's just taken 3 steps further away from photography, whereas a photoreal tattoo was only taken 1 step from photography.
Yeah.
But you're still
definitely stripping it down to its simplest form.
Mm-hmm.
And
when you do that, you really have to decide what's important, and the things and the decisions you make really have to be right, because there's no hiding it in frills and stuff like that. I mean,
exactly.
It becomes infinitely harder once you stripped it down to
no room
its
for error.
simplest form. Yeah. Like, I'm by no means like a traditional tattooer, but it's.
But a lot of stylization and stuff like that, and that stuff has to be. I mean, I say that because you can look at a ton of portfolios and see just really glaring mistakes. Like light that doesn't light coming from the wrong place. Like the light's hitting from here on this spot and from here on this spot, and it's like, well, where is your light source? This is a really simple design. It really should follow the same light source,
if that's what you're going for, yeah.
Right. I mean, but you tend to, and it's really easy to flatten things out and make them look awkward just by making those kinds of errors. And I think the easiest way to solve that is to pay attention. I mean, we have light all around us. It's the easiest thing in the world. Look, what is it actually doing? What does it actually do to that picture frame when it hits it? Where does it catch the lip of that little coping? Stuff like that. And then as long as you're following that rule that's right in front of you, then that's it.
Yeah.
That's a little bit off subject, but Nick just reworked my hand today about a 10-year-old tattoo, and I've noticed you've done a bit of that now. And actually, the reason I even brought it up was talking to Jeff about it, and he was like, "Oh, Nick's been doing a lot. He's been enjoying going back into old tattoos. What is that?"
It's my fault.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Why are you? Was that a conscious thing, or did you just come across a couple and be like, "Wow, those really need to be reworked," and started pursuing it, or?
I think I just hit the point in my career where I hit the 15-year mark. So anything from years 1 through 5, 1 through 6, maybe even years 1 through 8, have worn and seen some aging, and some of the techniques I was still experimenting with to an extent, and still kind of in the rough stages of development. I've now seen what of those actually works and doesn't work, and I've also been really lucky throughout my career I've always had really conscientious clients, really good clients who care about their skin art, who care about their tattoos, who may also be tattooers themselves. So they know when a tattoo looks a little bit worn, a little bit faded, and could use a little, touching up, a little refresher. So it's a combination of all those things. So basically, I just hit the point in my career where people start coming back, being like, "Hey, I got this from you 10 years ago. this part's a little faded, or like I know it could be a little sharper. So can you book me an appointment? And I'm like, sure, yeah, I would love to have all the work that I put out there looking as good as it can look, because that's a reflection on my reputation and my and the quality of my work. So of course I don't want something walking around out there that doesn't look as good as it could look.
Sure.
So yeah, come on back.
Yeah. And it kind of like we talked a little bit about it. It kind of forces you to like, or it helps you to see like your progression over the years. I'm sure, huh? Like you look and see the changes that you've made. It allows you to see what worked and what didn't. We were talking about all these oranges and yellows that kind of fell out and didn't work that well, and so it's like a learning experience too, huh? Getting to look back in these things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, orange tattoo pigment, just like you were saying about the red, I need to put it out there that orange tattoo pigment from just about every major pigment company, I don't care who they are, if they're using this one base pigment that they all buy from the same like powder manufacturer, I think it's like 3M or somebody. Orange pigment does not last in the skin. The sun gets rid of it. So just FYI, like, so anyway, first 5, 6, 8 years of my career, I'm using a lot of this orange. It's really bright. It's vibrant. It looks great the second it heals. It looks amazing. And I'm trying to do a lot of like painterly glowing effects and all this stuff. So for my work in particular, as opposed to a super traditionalist who might use only like black and red and blue or whatever, for me, it was more of a problem. I have all these pieces nowadays, like the one on yourself, coming back where the orange is just gone. I mean, it's just back to skin. It's like I never even tattooed that part of the tattoo. And so that needs to be fixed. And so now I'm just trying to do a little bit better with it by taking red ink, which we know doesn't fade, and taking yellow ink, which for the most part, I haven't seen it disappear the way orange does, and just mix those and skip the actual orange color that these companies put out, because it's a fugitive pigment. It doesn't last. So I don't know.
Yeah. I just had a thought and it left me. Completely had a point to make and I forgot it. Oh well.
You're gonna have to edit that out.
Yeah, no, we don't edit anything. It's just it just runs through. All right, well, let me see if there's anything that I missed while we're fumbling around here. Just so like I mentioned, we're talking mainly to like newer tattooers, and a lot of the people that send in questions and that send in their work for critique and stuff like that, they're 2 years or less. A lot of them seem to be like they're coming from smaller towns where they don't have a huge tattoo community. They don't have a lot of like fine art around them. They're really kind of going by what they see online, and that's why I brought up the idea of like so many people drawing tattoos from tattoos, and how there's so much more opportunity than that. Anything that's if any short bits of advice for a guy that's been tattooing a year and a half in a podunk town and is just trying their best to learn? I mean, and maybe keeping it more towards like the value of working in other mediums. Maybe some things that they could try to.
Well, step one is get yourself the internet, because
that helps.
That is bringing the entire world of human information and human culture to your screen.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse. If you are in such a remote area that you can't even get internet, well, then you get a free pass.
Yeah, right.
But
maybe
if you
it's time
can
to
get
move.
reliable internet access, there's no excuse for not having a world of information at your fingertips, literally at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I sort of have internet.
Yeah. You're out in the boonies now too, huh? Do you have HughesNet?
Are we allowed to say brand names?
I don't know.
Yeah, sure. HughesNet.
Do you? Is that
fucking awful?
Really?
Yeah, it's the worst.
I've seen the commercials. I'm like, wait, what is that
Those
even?
those people don't have HughesNet on those commercials, 'cause they wouldn't be that happy. They're like smiling as they're fixing a motorcycle or something.
Right.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
It sucks.
It just came back to me. The point I was going to make, you were talking about how those things didn't last, and one thing I try to stress a lot is to for tattooers to see their healed tattoos and photograph their healed tattoos for their portfolio, instead of we preach that even more to the collectors that write into the show. It's so important to see healed work. So many flaws are hidden in fresh tattoos, and with photography tricks and fresh tattoos combined, especially as easy it is to like bump up saturation and add filters and things and make everything look cool. I think there's a lot of trickery that goes on. A lot of people hide their flaws, and then so for the consumer, for the tattoo collector, I think it's important that if you're getting tattooed by someone, make sure that you've seen, if at all possible, healed work in real life, but at the very least healed work. And for the tattooer, if you weren't seeing tattoos coming back, you would think that you had all these bright orange tattoos out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about communication, as simple as that sounds. Just maintain a good relationship with your clients. Like, you have their number presumably, or you have their email presumably, and check up, ask how it healed, ask if they're ever swinging by your part of town, like, come through the shop, let me see how it healed, like, let me take a picture.
Yeah, I know. With larger pieces, especially, or pieces that I've put a lot of time and effort into, I'll a lot of times I'll schedule a photography session. Like, look, let's schedule 20 minutes, in a month or 2 months or whatever, and let me. I'm gonna have to shave your arm again, but we're gonna get some good photos of it, and that not only is it nice to see that in your portfolio to see healed work, but it's nice to see exactly how that came back.
I try to always get that stuff when they come for the next tattoo.
Yeah, exactly.
It's usually a good opportunity to photograph the stuff you did on them last time if it's been a couple months or something like that.
Yeah.
And if they're not coming back to get another tattoo, maybe it didn't heal good.
Maybe. A lot of times I'll disguise it as like, let me just schedule like a touch-up session just to look through it and make sure everything healed well. And half the time, there's no touch-up involved. Just like they show up and you're like, oh, it looks awesome. Can I get some photos? Because some people may not want to come back just to get photos taken.
Yeah, there's always that aspect.
Well, it can be hard too. I know we're talking about more newer tattooers, so it might not affect them as much. But if you've got people that are traveling, like you're traveling to get tattooed,
it's a lot harder.
It can be difficult to get healed photographs of some of that stuff, especially if it's like a one-shot, tattoo that someone flew in for or drove from some town far away. That it can be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it's more important to get the healed photos earlier in your career to prove. And once you've reached a certain saturation level where a lot of people have seen your work, they know it's legit, maybe it's less important. And like what Jeff just said, at that point, you're probably tattooing people from far away anyway, where you're not going to catch up with them again to get your healed photo.
Yeah.
So, but it's sort of it sort of cancels itself out at that point.
Yeah, and it's not always possible, regardless where you are, I guess, in your career to get healed photos of everything. But whenever possible, I think it's it's pretty important, and especially for people that are looking for an artist. I mean, I think that we get so many photos of tattoos that it's like, I saw this work that this guy did on my friend, it was beautiful, and then here's mine all healed up. It's like, yeah, you probably saw fresh work on your friend, you saw it the day it was done or whatever, and it looked nice and shiny, and your friends go look at theirs, it probably looks like that too, because you haven't seen a healed tattoo.
I was gonna say, it almost is more important when you're first starting out in your career to see that stuff healed, because even if you're not going to photograph it, if anything, it lets you know what you're doing is it working or is it not working.
Yeah, you can see what is working and what's not.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I first started, I tattooed a lot of people that were traveling to get tattooed, but not because I was some good tattooer. It was just because I worked on the edge of a state where it was illegal to get tattooed.
Right.
And so people came, and I would do a tattoo on them and probably never see that person again.
Yeah.
And it probably made it harder for me. It took me longer to figure out what worked and what didn't, because I never got to see that stuff. It was different than a lot of people, like how they start, where, you get to tattoo your friends and, you're tattooing some people around town. You get to see that stuff. A little bit of experimentation as you go, but you find out what works and what doesn't. I was just kind of like blindly doing stuff, and I was like, ooh, see you later.
Take it easy. Good luck with that.
Obviously not the best thing, but it was
what you had.
It was what I had available to me at the time. So.
I mean, that's unfortunate, because you're not. No matter where you are in your career, everything you try, if you're always pushing yourself to do something more, everything you try isn't going to work. No matter how accomplished you are, you try new techniques or try to especially when you're working with skin and you're like, how far can I push that? Like, where is the breaking point in this? And if you, I've been tattooing 18 years, and if I try something new, there's a chance it may come back and look shitty, and I have to do it all over again. And then I know, like, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And it's unfortunate if you're, in a situation where you don't get to see, especially the more experimental stuff, or either earlier in your career or further in your career when you're really trying to push it and see what your boundaries are and stuff like that.
And no matter how long you've been tattooing too, like, I mean, we're all just kind of figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
So I guess if if it's newer tattooers that are watching this or listening to this, I think that's important to remember that, someone could be tattooing for 20 years and it's not like they've got it all figured out. We're all just, we're all making like baby steps towards, being a better tattooer. And if you're not, then you're not pushing yourself enough to progress at all. So we're all kind of figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that wherever you are in your career, you see what other people are doing, what people around you are doing. You're trying to pull and like, oh, can I borrow that and make that work for me? And I know in your case, I've seen when your work first became prominent and you were in a lot of magazines, there were tons of people trying to pull off those textures and stuff. And a lot of people that weren't even competent in putting in a solid field of color were like noodling in with little 3-liners trying to build all these crazy textures and just fucking things up bad. So anyways, the point being is like, you're always trying to like look and say, oh, I like that little effect he pulled off right there. Maybe I could use something similar to that in mine. And then whoops, that was too far. It didn't work in mine. Yeah. So where are we on time? Any idea?
It's about 40 minutes.
Cool. I think that's good. I don't think we missed anything. You good?
And we can promote our upcoming art show.
Absolutely. I was going to get to that. Yeah. So so you've got the painting book out in an ebook form now, right?
Yeah, just released my instructional painting book as an ebook.
What?
Yeah.
No paper?
No paper. The hardcover edition sold out.
I have the old school ring binder edition.
Yeah, it was originally a ring binder, like close to.
Yeah, and it's great. I've read it quite a few times. It's really a good book. So you've added some new content for the ebook?
Yeah, I wrote a bunch of new stuff for the ebook, just to give an incentive.
Do you have the hardback?
I don't. I just have the.
It's a world of difference between like that first one.
Well, yeah, but between the binder and the hardback, yeah.
There's no other book out there that connects painting to tattooing, and even if you don't paint, there are so many things that he's talking about with specifically a painting that can be directly translated to tattooing.
Huh.
I think any tattooer can benefit from, at the very least, like thumbing through that book.
Yeah,
so it's a good book, and I'm not saying that just because he's right here.
Yeah. No, I really just that first edition was great. I'm sure that the hardback, like as far as the because you have a lot of progress photos and things like that, and you show exactly how you build up.
It's the closest thing to a textbook next to reinventing the tattoo.
Huh.
So I think Nick went through great efforts to like. If there's like an ultimate tattoo book, it'd probably be Reinventing the Tattoo.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then Nick's would be like seriously like right there, right next
Thanks,
to
man.
it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But part of our conversation during this podcast was straight from my book, talking about layering and talking about how one medium affects the other. And I wrote this thing specifically for tattooers. Like the language in it references tattooing. It shows pictures of tattoo needles next to paintbrushes. So that people can see and compare. So that was another thing really that I wanted to throw in there, that it's definitely helpful, even if you're not trying to learn like photorealism, oil painting, like how Jeff was saying. A lot of the broader knowledge should translate over, so it could be cool for people, so they can go to my website and find out about it in order.
NickBaxter.com.
I wanted to say that because a lot of people have said like, oh, that seems like that's too much for me, or I don't paint like that or something. It's like, dude, you should please do yourself a favor and look through that book.
Yeah. It's amazing how, even if you, there's a book that I refer back to a lot. I don't even know who wrote it. It's a paperback that I picked up at some art store, and it's just called How to Paint Like the Old Masters. And it's like, it goes through what they imagine a handful of different old masters, like processes were, what their pigments were, what their mediums were, how they started and all the way to finish. And like, it's not like you're going to sit down and go through and try to like recreate a Rembrandt or anything like that. But if you pull one thing that you can use out of that, then it was, worth the $20 that that book costs or whatever. So yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, I'm sure you don't have to be trying to build up crazy textures and do a lot of the real painterly stuff in tattooing that you do to get some value out of it, I would imagine. Where else you can get it at nickbaxter.com, and I think I was looking, you can get it on a couple of other sites as well, right?
Yeah, you can go to tattooeducation.com, which is Guy Aitchison's website. He sells all kinds of education products from all tattooers. Yeah. So it'll be there soon, if not already. But if you want it now, you can just go to my website, and there's like a link to how to buy it and everything. Okay.
Perfect. And you guys are working on an art show that's going to be here in Austin. Do you know the details yet, or?
Yeah, Jeff, you
wanna? Wait, what? It's the third weekend in.
Yes, it should be the third weekend in November. It's at Mind's Eye Creative Studios.
Mind's Eye Creative.
Yeah, MINDZAI. They're a printing company that services the tattoo industry. They're pretty cool folks, and they have this warehouse space here in Austin where they host art openings and just art parties. And they're usually pretty cool events. They draw a lot of people. Yeah. So they offered to host this show between me and Jeff there, and so Jeff and I are each working on a series of paintings, and it should be fun.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like stripped down tattoos and very rendered tattoos, where our work is gonna have quite a bit of contrast.
Yeah, that should be interesting. I haven't seen much of what Nick is doing for this, but I've seen some of what you're doing, and I would imagine there's going to be a real contrast.
Different. I mean, there'll be like a compliment, but it won't be like. I think it's cool because it won't be like two people that paint kind of similar, where it's like, it's like it's almost competing in a way.
Yeah,
this will be like two totally different worlds, and I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah, same creative spirit, but totally different execution.
Yeah, that should be fun. I hope to make it back down. I'm just thinking about maybe trying to schedule a sitting or something around that time where I could be here that weekend. I'd love to see it. So you said the third weekend of November, which would be the 15th and 16th if that's right, or 14th and 15th if it's Friday of November.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if it's supposed to be like the third Friday is the opening party.
Okay, so that'd be the 21st. What I'll do if we're wrong, I'll try to keep up with it myself, and I'll just post it on on the
it'll
episode.
Be on my website. It'll be on Jeff's website. It'll be on the Mind's Eye Creative page. They send out a newsletter.
We'll probably be posting stuff about it soon.
Yeah, it'll be on Instagram. It'll be saturated. For sure.
NickBaxter.com, JeffEnsminger.com. You want to spell that just in case people?
I don't know how. ENSMINGER. Ensminger. It's official. Now
That's it. And FiresideTats.com. And we don't condone the use of the word tats in any context outside of this podcast, because it increases your level of douchebaggery a lot. Just say tattoo. It's better. All right. Thanks, guys. Good episode.
Thanks, man.
All right. Awesome. That was a good one. Thanks.
Yeah, that was fun.